There we go. Okay, great stuff. So welcome everybody who's joined already. We've got a decent number in, but we've still got quite a few people left to join. We've got a lot of stuff to cover during the course of today. So there's myself and the boss, CEO Stan Markov. So we're going to be having a little bit of a talk about what we've brought to market with Runecast Analyzer 5.0, which we released very, very recently, and some of the things, the problems that we're looking to help people to solve. What I'm going to do is I am going to just keep chatting a little bit, give people maybe another minute to get logged in. So if you need to grab a coffee or anything, please do feel free. I'm just going to drink lots and lots of water.
Cheers, Kev.
Trying to be a lot more healthy at the moment, so lots and lots of water, trying to drink less tea, less sugary stuff. So yeah, lots of water with fruit juice in. I'm not doing very well at it, but you've got to start somewhere.
I don't feel so good about my tea now.
I think you've seen the size of the cups of tea I drink, Stan. I think I must have had about 6 or 7 of those today, and they're the big cappuccino bowl type things. So yeah, there's always that. Okay, so hopefully everybody can hear us fine. The broadcast all seems to be going okay. Could somebody just put a hand up in the chat or say hi or something? Yeah, there we go. Everything sounds good. We got some people. Wow, there's some names I recognize there as well. Wow, there we go. The new platform works. That's always good. So so welcome to Runecast 5.0, Runecast Analyzer 5.0, where we'll talk about Azure, we'll talk about Essential 8, and some of the other changes that we've been making to the product in the latest release. So for those of you who don't already know me, my name is Kev Johnson. I'm the Tech Marketing Manager at Runecast. So I do a whole bunch of stuff. I write white papers and blogs and make videos and do all kinds of other stuff. I think my job is the most fun job at the company as far as I'm concerned. But I kind of feel like it's my job to make sure that we're making Runecast Analyzer the absolute best product that it can be for our customers. My background, I used to work for VMware. Before I worked for VMware, I headed up a team of consultants, but I'm a time-served, dyed-in-the-wool sysadmin. So in much the same way as quite a lot of the people on this call, I would imagine. You can catch me on my blog, v-it.pro, my podcast that I help run with a fellow Runecaster. And also you can catch me on Twitter. Twitter is where I tend to spend most of my not work time. And yeah, if you've got any comments about any of this, including my haircut, this is the last Runecast webinar where I'll have this hair. I'm having it all cut off at the weekend. I'm very, very grateful for that. So yeah, that's me basically. I'm just going to hand over to Stan. Stan, if you want to introduce yourself, please.
Hey everyone. So I'm Stan Markov, and I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Runecast. And prior to Runecast, I spent a lot of time, many years in IBM. That's where I met my co-founders. Got pretty highly certified with VMware. I'm VCDX and former VMware instructor as well as IBM Redbooks author. Yeah, we started Runecast in the end of 2014. So we've been on the market for quite some time now, 6-7 years. And some of you probably know Runecast well. Maybe some of you hear it for the first time. So I'll be happy to introduce what Runecast is before we actually move to Azure. You can catch me at Twitter as well. I spent not as much time as Kev on Twitter, but I'm definitely from time to time active. So,
indeed, great stuff. Thanks, Stan. So I think you're going to do a bit of an introduction to what Runecast Analyzer is. So I'm going to just be quiet. I'm just going to make the slides a bit bigger on the screen for people.
Yeah, and I'll start a little bit with the whole story, since I'm one of the co-founders, and I mentioned we used to work for IBM. We actually started working with VMware technologies at the time when VMware was used just for test and development purposes. And at some point, everybody started virtualizing even their most critical workloads. So that really enabled us to build a big VMware center of excellence within IBM. And we managed most of the IBM customers running VMware across the EMEA region. And we had to do a lot of firefighting. We had, of course, monitoring systems that could tell us if an ESXi host or some virtual machine crashes. So we would go and start troubleshooting for hours or sometimes even days or weeks until we find the root cause of the solution and of the problem. And after years of firefighting, we realized that when we did analysis of all these problem tickets, that most of the issues, over 90% of these problem tickets and their root causes, were based on some known issues, vulnerabilities, or best practice violations that were already documented somewhere online, either in the VMware knowledge base, some vendor documentation, or even some forums, security guidelines, or hardware compatibility lists. That's why we realized that if we find a way how to harness all that human-readable, unstructured knowledge that's updated all the time and turn it into machine-readable rules continuously, we could proactively use those rules to discover risks in the customer environment before they strike, before they cause outages, some security incompliances, or other problems that could come out of best practice violations. So that's why we started developing Runecast Analyzer in 2014, and we launched it in September 2015. And we started with VMware. So we did this concept of using this knowledge to discover potential risks in the customer environment for vSphere. Then we added vSAN, NSXV, NSXT, Horizon, recently also VMware Cloud Director. And we thought that this unique patented end-to-end know-how that we have of harnessing the human-readable unstructured knowledge to help customers automate their security compliance, increase the uptime of their systems, and pretty much optimize their hybrid cloud, we could do that not just for VMware, but also for other technologies out there. So we added support for AWS, for Kubernetes, whether it's you're running Kubernetes on-prem or you're using AWS EKS or some other Kubernetes service. And just recently, something we'll be focusing a lot on today is the fact that we also added support for Azure. So now you can use the same platform, Runecast Analyzer, to connect to all of these technologies, your on-prem VMware, VMware Cloud on AWS, pure AWS public cloud, Kubernetes anywhere it runs, and also Microsoft Azure. And in one place, in one dashboard, you're able to see any potential risks, best practice misalignments, security incompliances, and so on. This slide also lists some of the sources of knowledge we're using. So vendor knowledge bases, hardware compatibility lists, vendor documentation, even social media. We are monitoring some curated list of influencers that sometimes are posting information about new issues that are maybe not yet recognized or documented by the vendor. In the last few years, also, we added support for a big number of security compliance profiles like DISA-STIC, PCI DSS, HIPAA, ISO 27001, and many others. So at any time, you can see whether you're fully compliant or there are some changes maybe you need to make in order to be fully compliant. You have out-of-the-box reports. So whenever you have a security audit, you can not only show them what's your current security compliance posture, but you have at least 365 days of historical security compliance posture as well.
Great stuff. Can we flip across the next slide?
Yep. I think I should tell next time. Yeah. All right. Thank you. So, yeah, this is just a quick architectural overview of where Runecast sits in your infrastructure. So I think, Kev, you will probably be speaking a little bit more on the deployment models. But traditionally, we were offering one deployment model only, which is very simple. A Runecast Analyzer is coming as a pre-installed, pre-configured OVA. So it's just one single virtual machine, quite small footprint. You can deploy it on-prem, and you can connect it to all of these endpoints, your vCenters, NSX managers, AWS accounts, Azure accounts, VMware Cloud Director, Kubernetes clusters, and so on. And we do not collect any data, so there's no data that's sent from Runecast Analyzer to us or another third party, which also makes it very secure. So you can even run this in completely offline mode. We release regular updates because there are new issues, new vulnerabilities, or best practices documented out there. So usually every Tuesday, we release an update that can be either applied automatically if you connect it Runecast to our central repository, Or if you're running it in completely offline mode, you could set up local repository or pretty much download an update file, attach it to Runecast Analyzer virtual machine, and perform the update this way. If there is a very highly critical vulnerability, we would release an update typically within 24 hours as well. For example, a new VMSA coming from VMware with very high rating, and we are very quick to react on those. All right, next slide.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
yeah. So I guess we take that leap now from what the architecture looks like and how everything plugs together, and then from there, if we just kind of leap into what we've got in Runecast Analyzer 5.0, excuse me. So one of the things that one of the areas we've really been focusing is in the Asia Pacific market recently. It's been a big growth area for us. And one of the standards that we've been getting asked about a lot is this Essential 8. And from the perspective of the technical ins and outs of Essential 8, as the name suggests, it's about doing the essential things right. It's pretty similar to the UK's Cyber Essentials. So the whole idea is, instead of giving you thousands and thousands and thousands of things that you need to check and validate, it gives you some really clear guidance on some things that won't take massive amounts of time. But just by doing these things, you can really help to improve your security posture. So this is the guidance from the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. So we were asked if we could help organisations to validate that they are running that they're actually performing the checks that they need to check, that they've got the things hardened that they need to harden in their environments. So we've got this in there from Runecast Analyzer 5.0 for vSphere in there. And this is roughly what it looks like. It's going to look pretty similar to a lot of the other checks and a lot of the other dashboards that we provide with Runecast Analyzer. So as with all of the other standards, we break things down in the way that the standard itself breaks things down. So in the case of Essential 8, what we have is a number of different mitigation strategies, things like patch control, application control, restricting administrative privileges. So we can show you where in your infrastructure these are going to be applying, whether you're passing or failing, and what you need to do about it. So it's pretty similar, as I said, to what we did with the UK's Cyber Essentials standard fairly recently. So it's a pretty simple idea. We take that data, we show you where you are compliant, we show you where you're not compliant, and we show you what you need to do in order to make yourselves compliant there. One of the other things that we've introduced recently, so this technically wasn't part of the 5.0 release, but we've not really yelled about it so far. So, why we should probably take this opportunity to talk about it now. So Stan mentioned in that kind of architecture slide that the traditional deployment model for Runecast Analyzer has been a VMware virtual machine. And as we've broadened the scope of the product, we've come across organizations whereby it doesn't make sense to tie them to require that VMware infrastructure because they're deploying things into the cloud natively. So we've got customers that are just running on Amazon Web Services, for example. It makes no sense for us to require them to deploy a VMware host and then point it just at AWS. So they've got this on-premises potential single point of failure. So now they can deploy natively into AWS using the AWS Marketplace and deploy it wherever you like. You can secure it using all of the standard native Amazon Web Services tools there. Hi there, Al Rashid. Sorry, just keeping an eye on the chat at the same time as well. It's always good to see some names pop up that I recognize. So yeah, we can deploy natively onto Amazon Web Services, and that's it's a nice simple. You run through a wizard, it deploys an EC2 instance. It's all pre-configured, and away you go. Point at your infrastructure and go. We also have an option to deploy natively to Kubernetes. So as you'll be aware, everybody's got to take a drink whenever somebody says Kubernetes, but as you'll be aware, one of the great things about Kubernetes is it can really help to, as a leveler, when you start thinking about things like, well, maybe I want to deploy into one specific location. But Kubernetes is a great leveler, kind of a little similar to how the Java runtime was. That's people who work with Kubernetes are not going to thank me for that analogy, but that kind of write once, run anywhere idea. So if we look, what we actually do is we leverage something called Helm, and Helm is basically a package manager for Kubernetes. So we package Runecast Analyzer up as what's called a Helm chart, and then you can deploy it to wherever you have Kubernetes, basically. So places that we validate this on are places like Amazon EKS, places like Google Kubernetes Engine, Red Hat OpenShift. So if you're deploying, if you're running your Kubernetes on OpenShift, that's absolutely not a problem. HPE Ezmeral. So we've been doing a lot of work at the moment with the HPE Ezmeral Compute Pro container platform. I'm getting all tongue-tied today. So yeah, the Ezmeral container platform. So we're actually in the Ezmeral Marketplace as well. So you can go to the Ezmeral Marketplace if you're running HPE Ezmeral, and you can deploy Runecast Analyzer from there. There's also the Azure Kubernetes service. So because we've just launched this Azure functionality, it makes sense that we would validate on those things. And finally, it wouldn't be a webinar without us mentioning VMware Tanzu as well. So Tanzu is obviously VMware's kind of umbrella term that they use for all of their container-based platforms. But yeah, there we go. Right. Okay. Cool. So that's that. In fact, let me just flip, because what I've actually got, just to show you how easy this is, I have a quick video of how easy it is to deploy Runecast Analyzer on Kubernetes now. So let's just see if I can get this to work. There we go. So here, what we can see is I'm just connecting to our Helm chart. I'm going to install the Helm chart, and then I'm going to make some typos, and I'm just going to install from our Helm chart. So over on the right-hand side, you can see I've got Minikube running on my laptop, and there we go. It's installing. We can see the red. That's going to turn green. There we go. So now Runecast Analyzer is running in containers on top of Kubernetes. So I just need to do some funky port forwarding. That port forwarding is now happening, and so I can open another tab. I can go to localhost on the relevant port, and I should see the port forwarding in the terminal window. There we go. And it's as simple as that. Now that video is slightly speeded up, but it gives you some idea as to how easy it is to run Kubernetes, to run Runecast Analyzer on top of Kubernetes. So if all you're doing is Kubernetes, that's fine. You can absolutely just run Runecast Analyzer on Kubernetes to analyze your Kubernetes, and everybody can stop drinking now. So let's just stop that video, and let's go back to the slides. So in terms of where we kind of started with Runecast Analyzer, we kind of started, as Stan mentioned, we were very, very, very VMware focused, and there was a really good reason for that. Our heritage, we were all working really, really heavily with VMware, and the problems that we saw were kind of, they were at the VMware level, so we were solving those problems. So we had vSphere, and then we had vSAN, and then we added NSX, and we've got Horizon in there, and those are kind of the core VMware products. And so we've kind of added in a whole bunch of extra functionality. Once we got to that point, we started looking at things like the cloud. So we added in Amazon Web Services, we added in Kubernetes. We then added in VMware Cloud Director, because why not? We've got service providers that want to use that. And then finally, we've just added support for Azure. So because of this kind of change, and we have, as I say, customers that are running purely in Amazon Web Services now. I expect we've probably got customers that are running purely on Kubernetes as well. So these areas are really, really big growth areas for us. So we had to have a think about how we were handling the licensing, because licensing is never a fun conversation to have. But let's have a talk about where we're taking things. I think, Stan, you were going to have a chat a little bit around where we're taking the licensing, just to kind of make things a little bit more flexible.
Yes, and one thing to say from the very beginning, that our AWS, Azure, Kubernetes licensing is something that we have publicly published already. So if you just go on runecast.com, There is a pricing page, so you could just go and check how it looks like. And specifically for Azure, so first of all, yeah, they're no longer tied to VMware. So far, we have been offering licensing based on the size of your VMware environment in terms of number of physical CPU sockets and on annual subscription basis. So we still continue to offer licenses on subscription basis. Right now, if you subscribe to analyze your AWS or Azure environment or your Kubernetes environment, then you need to count the number of your billable assets. So you will not be charged, or you don't need to license all the objects you have in your Azure environment, but just the virtual machines and SQL servers and I believe network security groups, Azure functions. But details of all of this you can basically see on our main website, so on runecast.com in the pricing page. And the pricing starts at $5 per billable assets per month, and it's built on annual basis. But again, yeah, I would refer again to the page there.
Yeah, actually, something I'll just jump in with there, Stan. So something to bear in mind, we're talking about billable assets, but only a very small subset of those resources that run in the clouds are considered billable by us. So it's not every single resource that you deploy into AWS is a billable asset. But yeah, go have a look at the pricing page on runecast.com. We've got some really good examples there, and hopefully that'll give you a better idea. But yeah, that's great. And I think one of the other things that we've not spoken about yet, and I'll let you roll out the red carpet on that one, Stan, the licensing.
Yeah, and one thing to mention also, and we still are offering our free trial, so you can go ahead and try any of these functionalities: VMware, Azure, AWS, Kubernetes. And actually, that's a good place also to see how many billable assets you have. When you're running a trial, and there'll be an indicator where if you hover over it, you can also see the number of billable assets you have in the accounts that you connected. One really important thing to mention, and it links back to the fact that with Runecast, you can analyze your on-prem VMware, VMware Cloud on AWS, AWS Azure, Kubernetes. There are, of course, many customers, and many of you are probably migrating workloads from VMware to Azure, or between maybe clouds, or maybe the other way, maybe from cloud back to on-prem. That's also something that is happening. And it's really important. It was important for us to make the licenses portable as well, because if you subscribe for a VMware subscription, maybe for 1 year, based on the size of your environment, and you're planning after 6 months maybe to migrate, let's say 30% of it to Azure, then not a problem. So your investment in Runecast licenses will not be lost. We'll make sure to convert part of these licenses proportionally to Azure licenses. Let's say if you're migrating from VMware to Azure, or vice versa, or if you're doing that between clouds. So that's really, I think, important to mention in terms of the flexibility you're having when you're subscribing with Runecast.
Absolutely. And again, just kind of to point back to that licensing and pricing page, there's a little video clip that's just on our YouTube channel as well, whereby you can see exactly how you can do an assessment as to the number of billable assets that you'd require. So that's I guess the pricing side of things. That's the nobody likes talking about pricing. It's always slightly awkward, but it's important that we announce these things so that people know that they have that flexibility to move their workloads without necessarily losing their investment there. So that's great. Thanks, Stan. And yeah, I'll let you talk a little bit about the, why we chose Microsoft Azure as well. In fact, I'm just going to open up all of these.
Yeah, I think that was really, really easy choice. Actually, when we were looking at what to do next after VMware, it was a hard choice between AWS and Azure. At the time, we had a slightly bigger demand for AWS, so that's the first thing we decided to do. And later on, we also developed the support for Kubernetes. But Azure, it's been demanded by many, many customers out there. It's very popular. As you can see on the slide, it's really 18% of the market. I think this will be increasing. So it was really a no-brainer that it will bring a lot of value to
everyone if we were to add, and we did support for Microsoft Azure. And this is really one of the milestones in our direction of having Runecast for anything. So we're not stopping really at these technologies that we have already, but Azure was really, really an important milestone. It has been growing faster. I think there'll be a very big competition. I think probably GCP is trying to catch up as well, but still a little bit far behind. But I know that a lot of customers might be also moving between AWS, Azure, and a lot of customers will end up probably having part of their environment in both. So I think it's really important that we support both of these.
Absolutely, because it's kind of the multi-cloud dream as well, isn't it? That whole idea that you're no longer tied necessarily to one specific provider, because people want to be able to say, okay, well, if you put the prices up or you discontinue a service, that's fine. My business is not impacted. And I think that's something we can definitely bring a lot of value to.
Yeah, exactly. You need to have that freedom. You need to have that reversibility. In any case, you cannot be stuck really with just one flavor of infrastructure, even if it's on-prem. So you should be able to migrate between different clouds and on-prem anywhere you wish. So yeah, and it's important to not have too many tools. I think that's probably mentioned on the next slide.
Yeah.
I think there are, of course, tools for maybe that are analyzing best practices, security compliance for one technology, for another technology. For us, and I think for many customers out there, it's really important that we follow their journey. That they're now starting to adopt more cloud, Kubernetes, and they can use the same platform and the same value prop, but for the new technology as well.
Absolutely. Let me just click through to that next slide then.
Yeah, so that's really, I think, one of the key points that Runecast Analyzer is solving, really having one place where you're using the familiar interface just to connect to yet another platform that's now Microsoft Azure. You can add all of your accounts for Runecast Analyzer to analyze them continuously. And that's a big problem that's been solved. But another problem is the skills gap. I think I speak for myself, but I think for many people as well, that nobody was born really with Azure skills, obviously, or AWS skills. I mean, and throughout the years, we had to learn, for example, Windows, Linux, VMware later on. Now, a lot of us are, learning or already learned Azure, AWS, and so on. But it's really impossible to know everything. You can't be an expert in everything. And really, Runecast, one of the main value props is that it solves that complexity for you. So we're monitoring the online space about best practices, about vulnerabilities, security compliance information, and continuously leveraging all that to give you all the important insights in your environment, whatever it is, whether it's Azure, whether it's AWS, on-prem VM, or Kubernetes. So I think solving that skills gap is really important. And there is a very good kind of learning quality about Runecast, because, for example, you will see later in the interface if Runecast is saying that you have some best practice violation and you have to change something in the configuration, for example, in Azure, it also tells you why this is a best practice and gives you a reference link where you can read more information about that particular best practice. So that's, I think, also really important to underline. Another problem that Runecast is tackling and growing demand is security and security compliance. So there's a big number of security compliance standards out there. And as especially clouds are being adopted more and more, it of course becomes apparent that the cloud provider will provide you with a platform with all the tools, all the configuration options that you need. Of course, you can do whatever you want with this configuration. You can expose anything you want to the internet. So it's important, of course, to also have a way how to automate your security compliance. And there are all sorts of security compliance standards out there, like PCI DSS and HIPAA, DISASTIC, CIS, something we'll be talking about today as well. It could really take a lot of time if you have to do all of this manually. Plus, it's really a question whether you can really do it to the full extent. So that's something that Runecast Analyzer also takes care of. Right, so I think we can move on to the next one. Speaking of tools provided for specific cloud platforms, maybe
Indeed.
we can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the questions. I mean, we've only just launched our support for Microsoft Azure, and I've already had a number of questions about how we compare against native tooling. So Azure obviously has the Azure Security Center, AWS has the AWS Security Hub, and there's obviously lots and lots of other offerings out there as well. And I guess the question really is more about what is good enough. Because if we look at this screen here, this is the regulatory compliance screen in the Azure Security Center, and from that perspective, it looks pretty good. I mean, I can see down at the bottom here that I've got some problems in identity and access management and security and the Security Center. Now, let's just highlight a couple of things that might be important, and the first one is this one here. So if you're running the Azure Security Center and you're analyzing against CIS, you're analyzing against the CIS benchmark 1.1.0. Now, the current release of the CIS benchmark for Azure is 1.3.0. So that might be a problem. It might not be a problem. It's going to depend on it's going to depend on how your organization is looking at these things, whether these things are important to you. But the other thing that I wanted to highlight, and this is probably even more important to me, is if we have a look at this text here. So if they're all green, it means those assessments are currently passing. This does not ensure you are fully compliant with that control. Furthermore, not all controls for any particular regulation are covered by Security Center assessments, and therefore this report is only a partial view of your overall compliance status. And this goes across all of the different standards that they cover. So again, you're paying money. You pay, I think it's $15 a month per virtual machine, for coverage of these, and it's not guaranteeing that you're going to be compliant with the standards. So if you're just looking for some guidance as to what's a good idea, then maybe this is fine. But I probably personally would be looking for something that is going to use the up-to-date versions, and also is going to be in a position to say, yes, you are covering every single check within CIS in this case, to make sure that you're covering everything. And the other thing, I guess, from the cloud native perspective, is it's only really applicable for that cloud service provider. Now, the Azure Security Center has some capabilities to monitor AWS accounts, but it's essentially just based on agents that you install into virtual machines. So it's not doing those compliance checks that cover the infrastructure layer. So anything above, well, basically anything outside of those virtual machines is going to be out of scope. So again, this is another area where I think Runecast Analyzer can really bring a lot of value to the table. So let's just click through, and as per usual for around this point in the sessions, I'm going to swap over to a live demo. So let's go set up. There we go. Let's go set up this environment. So this is just this is just the lab that we have in Runecast HQ. It's connected up to a whole bunch of different sources of data. So it's connected. It's already actually connected up to an Amazon to an Azure account. I wish they didn't. Oh, yeah, there we go. So we're connected up to 3 vCenters, an NSX Manager, an NSXT Manager, some VMware Cloud Director. And I'm just going to walk you through what we need to do in order to connect up to an Azure tenant. So if we click in here, in fact, no, before we do that, let's have a look at how you find out what you need to do to set this up. So something else that we've done recently, and again, this isn't really related specifically to a product release, but we have made this available, is we moved from this model of having a user guide that was a PDF that we had to regenerate every time there was an update. And the main reason for this is as soon as you've got a PDF, it's pretty much out of date. So you then need to go and download another PDF. So we have this capability here. It's just at docs.runecast.com. All of our documentation's here, and this functionality should be coming into the product as well soon. So that's going to be another pretty cool thing. So you'll have full access to the latest version of the user guide, even if you don't have an internet connection. So we can come in here and we can say, okay, well, deployment-wise, if we want to do some initial configuration, connect to a system, and we can see here, this is how we do these. This is how we connect up to the various different systems. Now, just jumping back to our system requirements, this is going to tell us the various different steps that we need to go through to connect to Microsoft Azure here. So we need to create what's called an app registration in Azure. We've got a video on our YouTube as well where I walk through how to do all of this. I'm not going to do this live because it takes a few minutes. But yeah, you walk through all of this, you generate some credentials, and then what we need to do is, I've already got some pre-generated credentials, so let's set up an Azure tenant. So first thing we need is our tenant ID. And I'm just going to copy and paste these judiciously. And then I need an application ID. So this is the thing that we have. The tenant ID is specific to your Azure tenancy. And then the application ID is the thing that we just created there. So that's basically says these are the credentials that Runecast Analyzer will connect to Azure using. And then we need a secret. And so I'm just going to copy this super secret thing in here. And then if we go continue, oh, that's the one I've already got. Brilliant. So if that was correct, let me see if I can, no, I've closed my window with that. There we go. So I've obviously just copied the wrong one. So I've copied the one that we already have in here, which is connected up. So let's just pretend I've done that correctly and not screwed up. And then what's going to happen is we need to run an analysis. So once we run an analysis, if you're in trial mode, you'll then see a little box up here that will show you how many billable assets there are in that tenancy. And then we'll see things within the inventory view, for example. So if we look in here, we can see we have this Azure tenancy in here, and we can now explore this Azure tenancy. So we can see things like we have a problem with this specific account here. So this is a guest account, and we should review guest accounts on a monthly basis in line with the CIS guidance for Azure AD. We can see there it's the user type is guest, and here's the reason why this is a finding. So we've got a really good piece of text here that shows you the logic behind periodically reviewing your guest user accounts. And if we wanted to do this from the Azure CLI, we can do that there. Or if we wanted to use Azure PowerShell, we can also do it there. And then in terms of how we remediate, we can do it in the console there. Here's a link to some documentations. So again, these are all, the CIS stuff. We work really closely with the team at CIS. We already have our VMware and our AWS functionality that's certified by CIS. We're working on the Azure functionality and the Kubernetes functionality right now, so we should be able to make an announcement on those fairly soon. But yeah, so we've seen how easy it is to connect up, especially if you actually make sure that you take the details of the correct tenancy rather than the one that you're already connected to. And we can see all of these things. And then if we have a look into the subscription, again, it's broken down in a very, very similar way to the way the VMware technologies are broken down. We see that the subscription is broken down into compute, containers, databases, networking, roles, security, and storage. And at each level, we can see exactly where we've got problems. So we have this, we've got this app here, and the app service authentication. Let's see what this is. So we should be using the app service authentication on the Azure App Service, and we can see that for this specific app, that service is set to disabled. So again, these are all problems in line with the CIS benchmarks. Now, what we might want to do is actually look at this more specifically from a CIS perspective. So if we have regulatory requirements or we've got audit requirements that are stating, what you need to do is you need to be able to prove that you are compliant with that CIS benchmark. So if we look in here, we can see this is version 130 as opposed to 110 in the security center. And we can see all of these things broken down. As with all of the other CIS benchmarks, with VMware, with Kubernetes, with AWS, we can see that these are for 130. We have this concept of level 1 and level 2 checks with CIS. This is across the board. And so from that perspective, level 1 is everybody who's doing this technology in production should be doing level 1. Anything below level 1, you're not doing your jobs properly, basically. If you are working in a higher security environment with more requirements, so maybe you're working in a military environment or a highly controlled financial environment, for example, you might want to have a look at the level 2 findings as well. But the level 2 are kind of like they're above and beyond for most organizations. However, if you are doing the level 2 checks, you still have to do all of the level 1. Otherwise, you're going to have big holes in your infrastructure, basically. So we can break all of these things down. We can show whether we're doing just showing the things that we pass on, whether we're just showing the things we fail on. We also have this concept of manual checks. So not every single check for the CIS benchmark, for example, is possible to do automatically. So we can't automate absolutely everything. We automate as much stuff as we can, but we can't do it for absolutely everything. So you'll see that some of these things are kind of, they're more kind of typically business policy related. So things whereby you might have a policy that says that you should periodically review and make sure that people have least privilege, for example. All of these kinds of things. So there's lots and lots of those in there. But typically where people want to have a look mostly is where they're failing. And again, where we see these failures, we're going to show you the source of that data. We're going to show you the actual text that says this is why it's a finding, and we're going to show you why it's a finding. So we have these 2 accounts, and we can see here, yes, because we have 2 guest accounts, we should go through and we should review those. That's kind of what it's kind of what we do. I've done enough of these webinars, enough of these demos to kind of just say, well, yeah, we've just added another technology and we've got the coverage for CIS. We've got these best practices in here. Oh, actually, we've not covered best practices yet, have we? So you see in here, we have a whole bunch of things in. So for example, best practices for MySQL Server, running on Azure for Postgres, etc., etc. There's best practices in here for obviously a whole bunch of other things as well. But let's say we want to have a look at SQL Server. So there's a couple of best practices for SQL Server on Azure. And so here we are with these. One of them's a medium, which is about failover groups in the event of the loss of an availability zone, etc. And the other one is about public network access. Now, public network access, you should never, ever, ever expose SQL over a public network because, yeah, it will just absolutely get brute forced. And you're either going to suffer from a denial of service because your security is working, or you're going to have a data breach because your security isn't working. So, for example, here we can see this is what the finding that we have. And it would appear that we've got a whole bunch of different server groups where public network access is enabled. So yeah, we need to go ahead and remediate those. And if we come back here again, we can do it from the Azure console. We can do it from the Azure CLI 2.0. So if you're more about that CLI experience, that's kind of where you want to be. I think that's probably, obviously we have all of the same capabilities that we have with all of the other technologies and all of the other standards that we cover. But yes, let's just have a quick look in here. So we have these capabilities. We can filter based on products. So if we want to look specifically at these various different database services, maybe some Azure App Services, we can build really, really rich views, and we can see where we've got problems. We can see, for instance, here we go from no findings to a number of findings very, very quickly. And things like, the correct TLS version on your MySQL server. A lot of these are, again, it's CIS, that it's a foundations benchmark. These are the things that we need to be able to see where we've got these problems so that we can fix them, so that we don't have a breach, we don't have any of those kind of problems. I think that's probably a good point for me to flip back to the slides and handily. When I got disconnected, I'm not sure what happened there, but we've got lots and lots of... All right, yeah, we've got lots and lots of chat. That's all good, and some questions as well. So let's go over to the Q&A slide, which I just found this. There's my dog is outside my office door at the moment, and she keeps barking because it's typically the time of day when she gets to go for a walk. So she keeps barking. I hope she's not getting in the way. But we've got a bunch of questions. If anyone else has any questions, please do drop them in the chat. Let me see if I can find anything in here that we can talk about.
Maybe
so Stan,
I can cover some of that, yeah, especially when it comes to roadmap. So
yeah, sure.
We've had, I was actually a little bit surprised, but in the last few months we've been having some demand for Hyper-V. So we've always planned to have support for Hyper-V. We kind of pushed it on our roadmap. It was kind of always in the backlog, but we will be most likely later this year. It depends. Now we're having some conversations with some prospects, but there's a very high likelihood that we'll be introducing later this year also support for Hyper-V. I just cannot commit right now to exact time of the year.
Indeed, and it looks like there's been quite a few questions about Hyper-V as well, which is interesting because, yeah, I wouldn't have seen that one coming, to be honest. I'd have thought people would be all about the cloud now, but that's cool. Interesting question there about Azure Stack as well. So I don't think we've got anything official for that, but
we don't support it now. That's something that we'll potentially have in a future release, but yeah, currently we don't support Azure Stack Hub.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the capabilities around the Azure Stack side of things. Now that we've got those API hooks into the Azure portal, that opens up a lot more potentials there. Chris Bradshaw. Oh, wow. Hi, Chris. So is there an option to deploy the Runecast Analyzer into Azure from the Azure Marketplace? Do you want to pick that one up, Stan?
Yeah, there's no option now, but that's something actually that we're working on right now. I think, yeah, the last time we checked, it probably will be available just in a couple of weeks from now. But let's say latest sometime in May. So just for a few weeks from now, it will be on the Azure Marketplace.
Yeah.
Currently, we have it, as Kev mentioned, on the AWS Marketplace. It's on the VMware Marketplace and also the HP Ezmeral Marketplace as well. And yeah, in just a few weeks' time, it will be on the Azure Marketplace also.
Indeed. So yeah, we kind of released the product, and then we've got to go through a whole bunch of extra validation to be able to deploy these things, because it's not just as simple as going, well, can you convert this OVA to be one of your images and all of that. But yeah, coming super soon. So watch this space on that. I'm sure we'll be making an announcement once that's ready. And there was the question about an Azure Runecast reference, and at present we don't have a reference customer for Azure, but I imagine it's not going to be very long. We only just launched the functionality, so customers haven't been able to use it until about a week ago. So watch this space by all means. Any other questions in there? Not seeing. Oh no, everything. I'm good for any kind of any questions. If anyone else wants to drop any more in, we've got another couple of minutes. But yeah, in terms of what's coming down the road, I think we've kind of covered as much as we really can. But as I always say, whenever I'm having conversations with anyone at Runecast, we're a really customer driven organization. So if you have a need for a specific technology, and this is kind of what we're seeing with the demand for Hyper-V at the moment, is we have people who are screaming out for it now. We can absolutely build it. We just need to hear from you. So it's really important to hear from you. And on the final slide, there's you'll see our Twitter handles and how you can email us and things like this. So yeah, we'll absolutely be interested in having all kinds of feedback from you. It doesn't look like we have. Is it one more question? If I have an Azure deployed appliance, could I use that to monitor on-prem VMware? I mean, there's no reason that you couldn't. The application is the same application. Obviously, there's a bunch of things that you might want to consider. You're going to want some kind of VPN back to your on-premises side of things in order to secure that traffic. But yeah, so that's that. Question from Badr as well. Any plans for IBM or Huawei cloud?
I think, yeah, we are having some conversations with some of those. Hopefully, they'll realize soon. But yeah, nothing particular I can share at the moment. I mean, I'm not super familiar with Huawei Cloud. I can tell you with IBM Cloud, it's mainly about validation because it really uses a lot of the, VMware products and that we already support. So it's not really much of a technological question as more a partnership question.
Yeah, if only the only problems that we had to deal with when we're dealing with these organizations were technical, then things would be a lot easier, right? But yeah, so, and also there was one question in the chat around Google Cloud. So Google Cloud is something that we are actively developing at present. I don't know if we have an official timeline when we're looking to deliver that, but it's definitely something that we're working on.
In the end of this year, yeah. GCP.
There we go. Okay. And again, so OpenStack comes along once in a blue moon. Someone will mention OpenStack. I don't know if that's. I think this is one of those. If there was a customer that had a real requirement for some kind of Runecast, and it would make commercial sense, then we could definitely build that technology. But it's a case of kind of making sure that we're not building tools that are never going to get used, because building something for something like OpenStack, there's a lot of validation, a lot of new engineering would need to go into that. But again, if it makes commercial sense, then it makes commercial sense, and these are the kinds of things that we can build. We've got some super smart engineers working for us. Let's put it that way. I'm not one of them. So on that note, have we got another? A customer has per CPU sockets. Can they add a trial for Azure? Yes, we can do trials. That's not a problem. If you just reach out to your Runecast account rep, and we can organize that for you. We don't have an Azure Runecast datasheet as yet. That's something on my list of things to create in the coming weeks. But they will be coming in the not too distant future, and obviously that'll be going out to all of our partners in the first instance. So watch this space on that front. If you have given Runecast Analyzer a try, or you want to have a look at some of the reviews from some of our customers, that QR code there will take you to our G2 page where you can leave reviews, you can read reviews. So there's all that stuff there. But on that note, we're almost at the top of the hour. So I just want to make sure we leave enough time for people to see this screen here. So if you are interested in Runecast Analyzer, the QR code fails. Oh, joy. Right. OK. Apologies for that. Let me go back and show you the. Let's grab the. We'll send out an email with the actual URL. I'll have to find out what's going on with that QR code.
By the way, Kev, I see myself on the bigger screen. So
oh yes, yeah. Let's do it that way. That works better, doesn't it? But yeah, so if you go to g2.com and search for Runecast, then you'll find us in there as well. So we get some really good feedback from our customers, and those kinds of platforms are super helpful to us as well. But yes, let's just any more. Oh no, that was. Can you pin up? Yeah, there we go. So on that note, I'm just going to flip across now. So if you want to try out Runecast Analyzer, whether it's for Azure, whether it's for AWS, for Kubernetes, or for your VMware technologies, if you go to runecast.com, you can sign up for a free 14-day trial. If you want to organize some more time, maybe a deep dive call to have a look at some of the findings, if you email us at innovate@runecast.com, we can organize a deep dive for you. And if you've got any kind of feedback about this webinar or anything else that you want to talk about, you can find us on Twitter as @Runecast. I'm at Kev_Johnson, and Stan is at Sverk. Is that how it's pronounced, Stan?
Yeah, you could pronounce. I think it's not that actually a word. It's too much of a long story, yeah. So I'm not getting to it, but
and we'd be more than happy to pick those up. And we'd love to work with you. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.